I stared at the Social Security documents spread across my kitchen table, my hands trembling as the numbers blurred together. 20 years of survivor benefits, money meant for me after my biological parents died, had been flowing into my adoptive parents' account while they threw me out like garbage. The same people now calling me son again after my startup hit 800K were thieves who'd stolen my inheritance while watching me struggle on the streets. My name is Marcus Williams. I'm 36 years old, and 3 weeks ago I sold my food delivery app for $800,000. You'd think I'd be celebrating, right? Wrong. I was sitting alone in my cramped studio apartment, staring at a stack of government documents that made my stomach turn inside out. The paperwork spread across my kitchen table told a story I never knew existed. Social Security survivor benefits, monthly payments, my name at the top, but someone else's bank account at the bottom. 20 years of money that should have been mine, flowing to people who threw me away like yesterday's trash. Let me back up. When I was 8 years old, my biological parents died in a car accident. One moment I had a normal family, the next I was an orphan with 3 younger siblings. The Williams family adopted all 4 of us. Robert and Linda seemed like angels back then. They had big hearts and an even bigger house in the suburbs. But here's where things get interesting. My phone had been buzzing all morning with texts from my adoptive mother, Linda. Marcus, honey, we miss you so much. Family isn't the same without you. Let's have dinner this Sunday. 20 years of radio silence, and suddenly I'm her favorite son again. What changed? Well, the local newspaper ran a story about my app sale. Funny how money makes people remember they love you. The early years with the Williams family weren't terrible. I wasn't treated exactly like their biological kids. But I wasn't mistreated either. I was the extra kid, the one who got hand-me-downs while the others got new clothes. Small stuff that an 8-year-old notices but doesn't fully understand. Then adolescence hit, and everything shifted. Robert and Linda's marriage started falling apart when I was 15. Screaming matches became daily entertainment. The house felt like a war zone, and somehow I became the easiest target for their frustration. Too loud, too messy, too much trouble. My siblings? They were family. I was just the kid they got stuck with. The breaking point came right after I turned 16. Linda sat me down at the same kitchen table where I now held these documents. She explained that with the divorce getting nasty, they couldn't handle the stress of 4 teenagers. But here's the kicker. They were only getting rid of 1 teenager. Me. We think it's best if you find somewhere else to live, she said, like she was discussing weekend plans. My siblings stayed. They got to finish high school in their comfortable bedrooms while I learned to sleep in shelters and friends' couches. The years that followed were brutal. I watched from the outside as David got his college tuition paid. Sarah received a down payment for her first house. Michael got a big church wedding with all the trimmings. Meanwhile, I was working 3 part-time jobs just to afford community college classes. Every family milestone became a reminder that I didn't belong. Christmas cards arrived for the Williams family, with photos that didn't include me. I became the ghost family member, acknowledged when convenient, ignored when costly. What really twisted the knife was how they rewrote history. When people asked where I was during family events, they'd say I was going through a rebellious phase, or chose to be independent. They made my abandonment sound like teenage attitude, instead of their deliberate choice to discard me. And the whole time, these monthly checks were landing in their account. Money meant to help raise the orphan they'd kicked to the curb. But that phone call from Sarah changed everything. After years of treating me like a stranger, suddenly the whole family wanted to reconnect. The timing seemed awfully convenient, don't you think? That's when I decided to dig deeper into those Social Security documents. What I discovered next would make their sudden interest in family bonding look even more sinister than I'd imagined. The investigation started small. I figured I'd just make a few phone calls, maybe check some old paperwork. What harm could it do? Famous last words, right? I called the Social Security office on a Tuesday morning, armed with my biological parents' information and a story about needing documentation for estate planning. The representative was surprisingly helpful. Too helpful, actually. She walked me through exactly how survivor benefits work, when they started, and where they'd been going all these years. My stomach dropped with each detail she shared. The benefits had kicked in immediately after my parents' death. Monthly payments designed to help with my care until I turned 18, then continued through college if I maintained good grades. The total amount made my head spin. We're talking serious money here. Money that could have changed everything. But here's the kicker. The payments were still active. Even though I was 36 and obviously no longer needed survivor benefits, someone had been collecting them. Someone who knew exactly how to keep the checks flowing long past their expiration date. The representative couldn't give me account details over the phone, but she could confirm the payments were active and suggest I visit a local office with proper identification. I made an appointment for the next day, my hands shaking as I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running numbers in my head, calculating what 20 years of benefits would total. Conservative estimates put it around $200,000. Money that should have paid for my college, helped me start my business, kept me off the streets during those brutal early years. Instead, it had been padding Robert and Linda's retirement account while they played the role of generous adoptive parents to everyone who'd listen. The Social Security office visit confirmed my worst fears. The benefits had been deposited into an account belonging to Robert and Linda Williams since day one. They'd been my legal guardians, so initially this made sense. But the payments should have stopped when they kicked me out. They definitely should have stopped when I turned 18. Somehow, they'd kept the money flowing. The caseworker explained that guardian status and benefit collection can continue in certain circumstances, but those circumstances definitely didn't include abandoning the beneficiary. What they'd done was fraud. Plain and simple. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. 20 years of struggle, 20 years of wondering if I was worth loving, and the whole time these people had been profiting from my trauma. The real gut punch. They'd used my orphan status to fund the very lifestyle that excluded me. David's college tuition, Sarah's wedding, Michael's down payment, all of it subsidized by benefits meant for the kid they threw away. My phone rang as I sat in my car outside the government building. Linda's contact photo smiled up at me from the screen. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Marcus Honey, her voice dripped with artificial sweetness. I hope you're thinking about Sunday dinner. We're so excited to see you. Robert's been telling everyone how proud he is of your success. Proud. The man who couldn't be bothered to attend my high school graduation was now proud of me. The same man who'd made me feel like a burden for 2 years before deciding I wasn't worth the trouble was suddenly beaming with paternal pride. I'll be there, I heard myself saying. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The sarcasm was lost on her. She launched into plans for my favorite meal, how she'd make sure to include me in the family photos this time. How wonderful it would be to have everyone together again. Everyone together. Like the past 20 years had been a minor hiccup, instead of deliberate abandonment. But I had plans of my own now. If they wanted to play happy family, I'd give them exactly what they were asking for. With interest. The next few days passed in a blur of legal research and document gathering. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in Social Security fraud. Turns out, what Robert and Linda had done was more common than you'd think. Guardians and adoptive parents sometimes continue collecting benefits after circumstances change, betting that no one will notice or challenge them. The penalties were serious: criminal charges, repayment of all fraudulently collected funds, possible jail time. My lawyer was practically salivating at the strength of the case, yet something held me back from pulling that trigger immediately. Maybe it was curiosity about how far they'd go with this reconciliation charade. Maybe I wanted to see if they'd come clean on their own. Or maybe I just wanted to watch them squirm a little before dropping the hammer. Sarah called Thursday afternoon, her voice bubbling with excitement about our family dinner. She'd always been the kindest of my siblings, the one who occasionally asked about me over the years. But even her kindness had limits. She'd never questioned why her adoptive parents could afford her college, but couldn't afford to keep her orphan brother. I can't wait for you to see how much everyone's changed, she gushed. Mom and Dad have been talking about you nonstop. They realize they made mistakes when you were younger. Mistakes. That's what we're calling it now. Not abandonment, not cruelty. Mistakes. They want to make things right, Marcus. They're even talking about updating their will to include you properly. Isn't that amazing? The will, of course. Now that I had money of my own, They wanted to dangle inheritance in front of me. The same people who'd stolen my inheritance for 20 years were now offering to share their wealth. The audacity was almost impressive. Friday brought another revelation. I decided to dig deeper into their finances, using some connections from my business world to get a clearer picture. What I found made my blood boil all over again. Robert and Linda weren't just comfortable retirees. They were wealthy. The house I remembered from childhood had been paid off years early. They owned rental properties, investment accounts, a vacation home in Florida that they'd bought around the time my benefits should have stopped. They'd built an empire partly on money meant for the kid they'd discarded. Every family vacation I hadn't been invited to, every opportunity my siblings received that I didn't, every comfortable retirement dollar they'd saved. Some of it came from my parents' deaths. The worst part was how they'd probably rationalized it. They kept my siblings when they could have given them up too. They provided a stable home for 3 kids. Didn't that entitle them to compensation? In their minds, they probably deserved that money. But Sunday was coming, the big family reunion. The reconciliation dinner where everyone would pretend the past 20 years hadn't happened. Where they'd play loving parents while secretly calculating how to keep me close enough to manipulate but far enough away to maintain control. I had other plans. Plans that would make this dinner memorable for reasons they couldn't imagine. The documents in my briefcase would ensure this family reunion became something none of us would ever forget. Sunday dinner was about to become very interesting indeed. Sunday arrived like a storm I'd been watching build on the horizon for days. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that said, successful but humble. Can't have them thinking I'd gotten too big for my britches, right? The briefcase sat by my door, loaded with enough documentation to blow their carefully constructed world apart. The drive to their house felt surreal. Same tree-lined streets from my childhood. Same manicured lawns that screamed suburban success. Nothing had changed except me. I wasn't the scared 16-year-old they'd tossed out anymore. Linda answered the door with arms spread wide, performance-level enthusiasm radiating from every pore. Marcus, oh honey, look at you. She pulled me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a politician during election season. All show, zero substance. The house looked exactly the same, which somehow made everything worse. Same family photos lining the hallway, carefully curated to tell the story of a loving family. Photos that conveniently started after I'd been erased from their narrative. Robert emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, playing the role of devoted family man. Son, good to see you, son. The word hit like a slap. 20 years of silence, and now I was son again. My siblings gathered around with genuine warmth that made this whole thing more complicated. Sarah hugged me tight. David clapped my shoulder. Michael actually seemed happy to see me. They weren't the villains here. They were just collateral damage in a much bigger game. Dinner conversation flowed like syrup, sweet and thick with artificial flavor. They asked about my business, my apartment, my plans. Linda kept refilling my wine glass while Robert launched into stories about when the kids were young. Stories that somehow painted him as father of the year. But here's where it got interesting. They started dropping hints about the future. Estate planning conversations. Family legacy discussions. Robert even mentioned meeting with his lawyer about updating important documents. We want to make sure everyone's taken care of, Linda said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Family should stick together, especially as we get older. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. The same people who'd stolen my inheritance were now dangling theirs in front of me like bait. That's when I decided to test them. You know, I've been thinking about my biological parents lately, their deaths, the aftermath. I barely remember the paperwork side of things. Linda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, sweetie, that was so long ago. We handled all those boring legal details so you kids wouldn't have to worry about them. What kind of details? I pressed gently. Robert jumped in, his voice a little too casual. Just standard stuff. Insurance paperwork, survivor benefits, that sort of thing. Nothing major. Nothing major. $200,000 was nothing major to them. The money that could have changed my entire life was just a footnote in their family story. We made sure everything went where it was. Supposed to, Linda added, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I nodded along, playing the grateful adopted son. That means so much. I can't imagine handling all that at 8 years old. The conversation moved on. But something had shifted in the room's energy. They thought they'd handled my curiosity, but I'd seen the flash of panic in their eyes. After dessert, Robert disappeared into his office and returned with a folder. Actually, Marcus, since we're talking about family and the future, I wanted to show you something. He slid papers across the table. Will documents. Fresh ones, dated just 3 days ago. My name appeared throughout, right alongside my siblings. Equal shares, equal treatment, equal inheritance. We want to make things right, he said solemnly. We know we weren't perfect parents, but family is family. I stared at those documents, marveling at the audacity. They'd stolen my past and now wanted to buy my future. The only thing standing between me and a significant inheritance was my signature and my silence. That's when I reached for my briefcase. Time to show them what making things right actually looked like. I placed the Social Security documents on the table like I was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. 20 years of benefit statements, bank routing numbers, legal correspondence, the whole beautiful, damning collection. The silence was deafening. Linda's face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Confusion, recognition, panic, then something that looked like she'd swallowed a live frog. Robert just stared, his lawyer-drafted will suddenly looking pretty worthless next to my pile of evidence. "What is this?" Sarah asked, leaning forward to read the paperwork. $200,000, I said calmly, give or take. That's how much survivor benefit money has been flowing into your parents' account since I was 8. Money meant for me. Money they collected while throwing me out like garbage. David's mouth fell open. Michael pushed back from the table like the papers might bite him. But Robert got angry. "We deserved that money," he snapped. "Do you know what it cost to raise 3 kids? We kept your siblings together when we could have dumped all of you." There it was. The mask finally slipped completely off. "You kept them," I said. "Just not me." Linda tried damage control. "Marcus, honey, this is all just a misunderstanding. We can explain." "Explain what? How you've been cashing checks meant for the kid you abandoned? How you used my dead parents' money to fund the life you excluded me from?" The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They'd gotten rich partly off my tragedy, then come crawling back when I got rich off my own success. Sarah was crying now, reading through the documents. "Mom, Dad, is this real?" I stood up, leaving their will on the table next to my evidence. "Keep your inheritance. I don't want money that might disappear the moment I become inconvenient again." Robert tried one last play. "If you take this public, you'll destroy this family." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You destroyed this family 20 years ago. I'm just showing everyone the receipts." I walked toward the door, but turned back one final time. "By the way, I've set up college funds for all your grandchildren. My biological family's legacy will live on, just not through you." The last thing I heard was Linda sobbing as the door closed behind me. This time, I was the one choosing to leave, and that made all the difference.